Light a flame inside your heart. See every finish line before you reach the start. Raise your fist to the sky. Lightning and mountaintops are made for you and I. Morning comes when the nightfall goes. Don't turn back to the road below. Bring on the fire, bring on the rain. Nothing can take you down. Crashing like thunder, steel in your veins. Nothing can take you down.
Good morning everyone, I hope you're well and welcome to Galvanise. I'm Kevin Kelly from MLN and it's my role this morning to do the housekeeping and the practicalities, the purpose of which is to ensure that you get every ounce of value from this event. Hope you don't mind the guys joining me for these remarks. My wife is a doctor. She's been doing her bit for the last few weeks, so this has been our word. It's been some fun and I'm sure many of you are in the same boat. Now, we want you to shape the conversation this morning, both inside and outside of the event. So firstly, on Twitter, the hashtag that we're using is hashtag Galvanise Summit, and that Twitter handles are at ABCB_council, at MLN_NI, at Hermes Insurance, and at Danske Bank_UK. We also want you to shape the event by asking the speakers the questions that are important to you. And there is a button to the right hand side of your screen, which is this way, I think. And you will need to exit the full screen in order to access that function and ask the speaker questions. There's also a button for the attendee feedback survey, and we would be most grateful if you would take the time to complete that after the event. It'll only take a minute or two. Now, usually my housekeeping involves in the event of an emergency. In this case, it's in the event of technical difficulties. Streaming live brings some degree of uncontrollables, be that with the internet at large, the internet at our end, the internet at your end. Now, we've rehearsed and tested over and over, and it's all gone very smoothly so far. But I just want to reassure you that if you do encounter any technical difficulties, we will be giving you all access to a full replay after the event, so you won't miss out. We will also make show notes available post-event, and these are the key takeaways that we've drawn from the event, so hopefully they'll be useful for you as well. So both the replay and the show notes will be available from tomorrow. Now, the concept of Galvanise was created just over 2 weeks ago. It was launched just over 1 week ago, and we now have 1,300, in fact over 1,300 managers and leaders registered this morning. And I want to thank a couple of organisations who have been crucial in making it happen. So if we can move to the side a wee bit, guys. On the stand you'll see the MLN champions. Without them, MLN does not exist, and events like this don't happen, so thanks to them. We want to single out 2 champions in particular for special thanks, and they are Hermes Insurance and Patrick. Danske Bank. There's one organisation, however, that I would like to give special praise to, and that is Neve.
RNC, Banbridge and Craig Gavin Borough Council.
The Council have shown incredible leadership and vision in putting this event together, and it has been our pleasure to work with them on it. And I want to finish my remarks by thanking the Council, thanking you for your time this morning, and handing over to Mila Campbell, the Lord Mayor of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. Over to you, Mila.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello everyone, I hope you are keeping safe and well. I'm delighted to join you for Galvanise, the first online management and leadership network summit. We are facing difficult and challenging times, and clearly now more than ever it is important to stay connected. As a council, we are committed to supporting and growing the local economy, which is why we are delighted to host this innovative event. This event has been designed specifically for you, local businesses and leaders, and this morning's summit will help you identify ideas, innovations and opportunities in order to stimulate both ambition and action. The Borough of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon is a sizable one, being the second largest council in Northern Ireland, and we are proud to be recognised as an industrious and entrepreneurial region with exceptional leaders. And I want to pay a tribute to the many outstanding people in this borough who have demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities throughout this crisis. Our businesses have diversified and adapted to respond to the many and varied challenges we face. They have driven innovation and put the needs and safety of others first. Likewise, our communities have pulled together, and it's very humbling to see the extent of the kindness and generosity of our residents, and I am confident this resilience will help us all through this unprecedented time. So I want to say a huge thank you to everyone. As a council, we understand how difficult and challenging the COVID-19 crisis has been for all businesses across all sectors throughout the whole borough. And I want to reassure our business community that you remain a top priority for us and that we are here to help you throughout these unprecedented times. To date, our business support team has assisted over 520 local businesses during the crisis. And I would urge all local businesses to keep in touch with us by visiting our website, where you can access one-to-one support and a range of useful information and resources. It is great that so many businesses have joined this morning's event, and it is my pleasure to give a very special welcome to our guest speakers. Rennie Kerry, MBE, Lara Morgan, Mark Gallagher, and our host, Professor Neil Gibson. I look forward to hearing from you all as you share your insights and expertise. And I hope that by the end of this summit, you will feel renewed, recharged, and gain a clear focus on your next steps, ambition and action. But before I hand you over to Professor Neil Gibson, please stay safe, keep well, and together we will get through this. Thank you, and over to Neil.
Thank you. Thank you to the Lord Mayor and to Kevin and to all his assistants who helped in that introduction. It's my name's Neil Gibson, and I'm the Chief Economist for EY on the island of Ireland. It's a great privilege and a pleasure to be your host for this MLN Summit today, this Galvanise Summit. Now, I'm not a professional host. I'm a humble economist. Maybe not so humble, but I'm an economist. So not as a professional host, nor a great technical person. We do run a few risks, as Kevin mentioned. So hopefully I will do my job of keeping us all to time and asking some of your questions to the very insightful and inspiring speakers we have coming up. I've had one technical pre-run of this, in which my main job was to negotiate a very significant family dispute as to whether Kevin's children would watch Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol. So I feel I'm really well geared up for a session on economics. Obviously, the answer to the question is Peppa Pig, of course, as I'm sure you would all agree. I want to do two things today. I will give you a flavour of the economy and where we are today, just to tee up the session. But really, we're all here as friends and colleagues who are interested in trying to do the very best that we can for our own business, for our community, for our friends, for our family, and for Northern Ireland as a whole. So we've got people from Northern Ireland, people who have been frequent visitors, people who've given a lot back to this region. So I'm hugely privileged that they're all joining us today. And I think I would want to preface my opening remarks by saying that We all want to give a shout out to the frontline medical services who've done such a great job during this crisis, but also those other jobs that perhaps aren't getting as much of the limelight. Maybe it's our delivery drivers, maybe it's the health, maybe it's our cleaning staff within our own organizations, maybe it's some of our management teams who have adapted to helping to train and re-energize and refocus our teams, as we heard from the Lord Mayor. But a lot of people have had to dig deep and find new skills in this very challenging time. And I think with so many leaders on the line today, it's important to reflect that challenge that we've all faced. And as this lockdown continues for some of us, that's certainly going to continue. And I think it's good to connect and hear from inspiring speakers. So do please take the opportunity to ask them the things that are on your mind. So, as I say, I will do my best to keep the time. Unlike Mark, you're going to hear from, I'll do well if I keep to within 10 minutes, not 10 hundredths of a second in terms of keeping us the time. But what I do want to do is give us a little bit of a flavour of the economic conditions that we're facing at the moment. We know, and the word unprecedented is thrown about frequently, COVID wasn't on very many of our risk registers. It certainly wasn't thought through in a lot of the public policy or planning networks, and all firms and leaders have had to wrestle with what this means. The unprecedented period of lockdown, the economic disruption that that's now causing, and the very difficult journey that we're now on in terms of trying to reopen whilst not compromising any of those health outcomes. And I think the way we have to consider this crisis is looking through those different lenses. There's a healthcare lens, of course, protecting our people, looking at the more vulnerable in society and what we can do to assist and protect them, protect our health service, protect our ICU units, and make sure that we can get through this crisis. But there are other health concerns too. Mental health. How do people feel and react to a long time away from their friends and colleagues? We're seeing a roller coaster of many people's emotions, even their attitudes to death, their confidence in leading their business. And I'm sure many of you will have gone through that roller coaster yourselves, feeling positive one day that we can adapt to this, we can react, and maybe another day feeling a lot more challenged and feeling a little bit lonely and finding it a little bit more difficult. You know, I've certainly had to come back on some of my addresses to my team and conversations with staff just to really, you know, maybe step back from something I'd said a day before, or maybe reflect on perhaps the mood has changed a little bit. So I think we're all going through that challenge, and that will play out. And in fact, some of the stories you're seeing in the press, some of the commentary from my own economics profession is written from the eye of that storm, and maybe is a little bit emotive or emotional, when actually some of the fundamentals of how we do business and how we lead properly don't change as much. There is still demand for many of our products and services. Maybe they're paused, maybe they're going to be changed a little bit, but much of what you've done to lead your business so well are still traits that we'll have to make sure we don't leave behind or lose, however significant this challenge and changing time will be. But the healthcare has moved on to an economic lens. All of these should be seen as a Venn diagram. They're all important, but we're beginning to see the shift to a focus on the economics, thinking about how to reopen our businesses, thinking about, as we heard in the introductory remarks, how we might realign, refocus, how we might create biosecure working environments, maybe create different ways of physically going about the work that we did in order to get back to some degree of normalcy. So we've got these economic costs, the debt that governments are running up, the jobs that are being lost, the businesses that are questioning whether they're viable going forward with some of the restrictions that might be in place. And then we've got societal challenges. We've got challenges that face, for example, our importance that we place on sport or on social gatherings or entertainment or leisure. I don't want to lose any of the respect of the audience, but it's a great sadness to me that I'll not be seeing Iron Maiden in Ormeau Park in Belfast in a month's time. Please don't switch off. That's not indicative of all speakers, I'm sure. But it's certainly changing the way we think about those events, those social gatherings. Maybe some of our labour markets are going to be really struggling. Think of our hotel, our tourism markets. You know, think of those that depend on international travellers to help drive their demand. They may face a very particular challenge. And something that I'm going to come back to just in the closing remarks here are that we'll all have our part to play to help this economic recovery. The money that we spend in our shops, the business that we give, the quickness with which we pay the bills that we have sitting on our desks will all play a material role in helping to support many of the businesses that you know and that you've relied on around us in Northern Ireland over the last few years. And the final of the four lenses is a geopolitical one. So we've got economic, we've got social, we've got health, and we've got this geopolitics lens. Will this make us feel that we're a global society, that we're a vulnerable and fragile species that needs to look together, to work together to solve life's biggest problems? That would be the great hope. Sadly, the early evidence is that we're rather more retrenching into protecting our own, bringing production close to home, looking inwardly. And perhaps that would be my great fear, is that we don't learn the lessons that actually working together as a global family is what's needed, not being more protectionist and insular. Coming closer to home in Northern Ireland, the early data suggests that we are facing significant economic disruption, but perhaps not quite as severe as some other markets are demonstrating at the present time. Maybe that's due to a bigger public sector, maybe it's due to less levels of commercial debt, but certainly the early figures are about 50,000 people perhaps coming onto the unemployment register in Northern Ireland, and maybe something like 200,000 on some form of other support, for example, and most significantly, the government's furloughing wage scheme. So that's a significant number. Maybe 250,000 of our people out of a workforce of about 900,000 are availing of some support at this time. And seeing those people back into work successfully, maybe a little bit realigned, maybe a little bit refocused, is certainly a great priority for policymakers. Many of those people have been those on lower incomes, people on lower shift hours, maybe at the lower end of the earning spectrum. And it's very important that we recognize the importance of employment to our societal cohesion across Northern Ireland. So getting jobs back, can you take people back a little bit earlier than you might have thought? Can you move to a part-time working rather than letting people go? These are all important managerial decisions that we have to remember, that while we think through the lens of P&L and profitability, we also play a very important social role through the jobs that we employ and support. So the final remark from me would be to say that, coming back to my point about our own role in recovery, we will make decisions, all of you as leaders, over the next few months that will play a material role in how Northern Ireland bounces back or bounces out of. I don't like bounce back because I don't think we'll go back to what it looked like before. As we bounce out of this into a new recovery, how it's reshaped, what we spend on, the choices that we make, all of those are dependent on the decisions you make, the people you employ, the salaries that you pay, the contracts that you sign, the other businesses that you support. At EY, we're thinking through the very important role we play in, buying lunches around our offices, of sponsoring events, of helping culture, arts around the regions. These are important aspects. It's very easy to think to cut back on your sponsorship, on your advertising and marketing at these times, but actually that not only benefits you to stay on the front foot, it helps those businesses that rely on that. And as we heard earlier, we're hugely grateful to the sponsor network that have made this event possible today, and we'll be hearing from some of them a little later on. That's enough for me. You can follow on LinkedIn and read my economic commentary if you're much more interested in GDP numbers and the technical detail. But what we really want to talk about today is this new energy that we need, finding our way through into a mode of recovery and resurgence. And to do that, I'm helped by three fantastic speakers, and it's my pleasure to introduce first Mr. Rennie Kerry, a renowned international speaker. He's advised and worked with global companies throughout the world. He's been an MD, a CEO, a chairman of many blue chip companies along the way, an inspirational leader, a writer, and someone who has been a great friend to Northern Ireland since his early visits way back in the 1980s. It's a great privilege for me to introduce him. I hope you'll all enjoy it, and please do remember to put through some questions for Rennie and our speakers. Please welcome Mr. Rennie Kerry, MBE. Rennie, over to you.
Neil, what an intro, my friend. I listened very carefully to what you were saying. Beautifully put. Sets me up beautifully because, I've been coming out to Northern Ireland since the mid-80s. I was employed by Marks and Spencer. We were involved in the opening of the Sprucefield store there. And ever since then, I've been privileged enough to see the progress, the development, and the positive energy. And this will pass. We must remember, this will pass. And the advice I'm giving to lots of my clients is, you've got to focus on the short term. Of course you have. But keep an eye on that long term. Keep an eye on the exit. Nobody can tell you precisely when it's going to happen, precisely how it's going to look, but be prepared. These are extraordinary times, and extraordinary times demands extraordinary leadership. So let's explode a myth to kick us off. The biggest myth in Western developed societies: leaders are only at the top of the organization. It's nonsense. Managers are at the top of the organization. Leaders are everywhere. And I'm hoping I'm speaking to over 1,000 speakers on this talk, 1,000 leaders on this talk today. Everyone can be a leader if they choose to be. It's your choice. It's not a job title. It's not rank. It's not hierarchy. It's about you. And every single person listening today is as unique as their fingerprints, and their leadership style will be as unique as their fingerprints. As we sit here today, there is no university on the planet that does a degree in leadership. It's management. Leadership is something completely different. For me, management is the IQ, leadership is the EQ. Management is the hardware, leadership is the software. Management, we touch it, we feel it, we think it. Leadership, we feel it. The empathy, the EQ. And let me just say it again. Everyone listening in today can be a leader if they choose to be. And what I thought I'd do today is talk about communication. In times of crisis, communication is essential. And we know the hierarchy of needs when we're communicating in times of uncertainty. Number one, the best thing is good news. Number two, would you believe, is bad news. Number three, the all-time low, is uncertainty. Be honest with people, be straight with people. But remember, as the great Maya Angelou says, not everyone remembers everything you've said, but everyone remembers how you made them feel. Even if it's tough news, think about how you're making your people feel. And I want to share a few stories with you just to bring that alive. Whenever you're addressing your people, Neil said earlier that he's got to talk to his teams. I've never known a time like this with so many of my clients who are having to have very difficult conversations with people who have served them well over the years. Furlough has come into our lexicon. Laying off people, redundancy, has appeared again. Let's remember, we're talking about people's livelihoods. It doesn't matter whether it's tough news, we can still worry about how we make them feel. The three things everyone's looking for in our communication today in times of uncertainty: clarity, certainty, and hope. Let me say that again so we don't lose it. Clarity, certainty, and hope. Let's go over a little story. 3 men on a building site, working hard in the burning sun. Breaking rocks is the toughest work you've ever seen. The journalist comes up and says to the first one, "Why do you do this job?" "I haven't worked for 3 years. I took the first job I could get." Goes to the second one, "Why do you do this job?" "I've got a wife and 3 kids to feed. I took the first job I could get." Goes to the third one and says, "Why do you do this job?" Puts his shovel down, leans on it, wipes the sweat from his brow and says proudly, "I'm helping to build a cathedral. I'm helping to build a cathedral." The role of the leader is to ensure that everybody in the team, no matter what their job title, no matter what their rank, no matter what task they're set at, feels as though they're part of something special. And your role as a leader is to give them someone to believe in and something to belong to. Everybody's helping to build that cathedral, temple, synagogue, or mosque. So remember, when you face your people, it doesn't matter what the isolated role is. The communication is to make them feel they're part of something special. Whatever they're delivering matters and makes a positive difference. Don't forget the cathedral. So moving on, a Lexus dealer opens up a new showroom, a new dealership. And in its first month, on a Saturday, a local executive pops in. Says, "I booked a test drive of your Lexus. I'm a bit of a Mercedes man, but I loved your showroom. I've loved the advertising. I thought I'd give it a go." He takes the car for a drive and he comes back in half an hour later and he says to the man in the dealership, says, "Lovely car, loved it, really great." And the dealer says to him, well, the next time you're thinking about changing your car, why don't you come and see me? And I've got a great deal for you. He says, I'm a Mercedes man. The last 30 years, I've only ever driven a Mercedes. It does exactly what it says on the can. I don't need it to do anything else for me. He says, well, that's great, but why don't you just think about it? Alex says, no. It's just, I'm so loyal to them. They've been so good to me. There's nothing ever gone wrong. He said, no, nothing at all. Every time I've bought it, upgraded the car, it's worked beautifully. There has been one thing recently, though. The cigarette lighter didn't work. I never smoke. But the kids use it as an extra piece for a USB. They have so many games, so many things going on at a time that it's a bit frustrating because 6 weeks I've been waiting and it's not like them, it hasn't come through. Off he goes. A couple of weeks later, his phone rings. And there's a voice on the end that says, that cigarette lighter in your Mercedes, it wasn't working. We've got the replacement. He says, that's fantastic. He says, in fact, if you want to pop over, we'll fit it for you. He says, yes, I'll be over. He says, usual place? No, I'm the Lexus dealer. I've got you the replacement cigarette lighter. He goes over to the Lexus dealer. He fits his cigarette lighter, shakes his hand and walks away. 3 months later, it's his son's wedding anniversary. He's promised him he's going to buy him a car. What car does he buy him? A Lexus. It's the little things that count. No matter how tough things are at the moment, it's the little things that count. Remember your customers, they will remember you. Remember what I said, clarity, certainty, and hope. So we do a lot of work with the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Los Angeles. It's, for 6 years on the trot, it's won the award, the world's #1 hotel. And believe you me, it really is. And it's where they filmed Pretty Woman, of course. Richard Gere, Julia Roberts, and everything you saw in that film is absolutely true. The general manager, Todd, is brilliant. He does something really special. Every week, every Friday morning, he has a management meeting. But at that management meeting, he invites the 3 doormen. The 3 doormen run 3 8-hour shifts every day. Why does he invite the 3 doormen? Because on those 3 8-hour shifts every day, they have 250 customer interactions. More than anyone else in the hotel, they are the front line of the brand, the touch point of the brand. They understand, they feel how customers are feeling about the hotel. But it's more than that. It's not just because they are the front line. When he invites them to the management meeting, he does something really special. They're not managers, but every single meeting they're invited. Guess how that makes them feel? It makes them feel part of something special. They're never item 9, they're never item 23 on the agenda for the management meeting. They are always item 1. They turn up in their best gear, in their uniforms. They're never late. No matter what shift they're on, they turn up. Why? It's important to them. And the first thing he says at the start of every meeting, guys, any insights on our customers? What's the feedback on the customers? How are they feeling? Just by asking the question, he's created a connection. By listening to the answer, he's created engagement. If he acts on what they say, he's created trust. Who do you invite to your management meetings? Where do they sit on the agenda? What do you do about making them feel really special? It's not difficult. Clarity, certainty, hope. So I'm doing a talk at London Business School here in London at the Careers Fair for the MBA class of 2019. And it's one of those sessions where everyone's fishing for the best talent that's available. And my job, along with some other speakers, is to energize the place and talk about the future of work. It seemed to go down well. And I'm leaving. As I'm leaving, I get a tap on my shoulder. And there's a woman there, and she says, I really enjoyed what you said. I'm a head teacher at a local school. Would you mind coming down and giving a similar talk to the students at my school? She was so compelling. She wouldn't take no as an answer. So a week later, I'm driving down to the school on a Monday morning. I'm thinking I'm doing a talk for the sixth formers or the 17, 18-year-olds. When I drive up to the school gate, it's Ainsley Wood Primary School. This was going to be interesting. I walk in and I'm led into the infant school. I've got the 5 and 6-year-olds. And no matter how tough an audience you've ever had, 5 and 6-year-olds are the most unforgiving. They will give you the most brutal feedback. And my God, you've got to hold their attention. So I get in there and she says, can you do 10 minutes? Of course. There's 60 of them. They're sitting silently. You could hear a feather drop. And it was tough condensing a talk into 10 minutes. But I remember, it's a careers talk. Clarity, certainty, hope. It seemed to go down well. They were so focused, they were so engaged. When I finished, they gave me the most polite and rousing round of applause. Their teacher said, now they're going to go through to the assembly hall. In the assembly hall, there were 10 stalls. There was the ambulance service in uniform, firemen, uniform, NHS, uniform. There was even some fitness instructors from a local gym. And in groups of 3, very polished, very organized, they went to each desk to talk about careers. Boy, did it teach me some lessons. They were so engaged. They were so bright. They were smart. They were energized. When I was leaving, the head teacher said to me, you're never too young to have a dream about your career. You've helped us help them to stay in education. They all have a dream now. Never underestimate what a piece of positive communication can do to anyone. And every single one of you, take that little moment. If we were to care for each other, look out for each other every day, what a difference we would make. So let me close on. We've got a few minutes here, but I'm going to close with a final story for you. It must have been about 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer. I was invited. It was one of those talks that my agent would say, it's the talk that every agent dreams of. When a client calls up and says, we need Rennie to do this for us, and we need it doing really quickly, fee is not an issue. My agent couldn't believe this. It just, all Christmases had come at once. I was due to go to Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if any of you know Atlanta, Georgia, in the South in America. It's one of the most beautiful cities you could ever find. It's also, quite surprisingly, 70 to 80% African American. The keynote speaker they'd booked some time before for this really big do in a massive auditorium was Rudy Giuliani. At a time when he had just after 9/11, he was the mayor for America, one of the most popular people in the United States. But prior to 9/11, he'd been the mayor of New York. And he was praised by many as having taken down the crime-ridden New York into a much cleaner, safer, better place. But for some parts of New York's population, they found him a little too tough, a little too focused, a little too hard-headed, a little too profile-led. And many of the minorities felt as though he could have been a little bit fairer and a little bit more understanding. I soon started to realize why I'd been drafted in at short notice. The audience in a very, very packed house. Everyone got there early. Everyone was waiting for Giuliani. Nearly everyone in there was waiting, but many of them for different reasons. And they weren't the happiest with him. And the organizer said to me, if it starts to go a little bit awry, step in and sort it out. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, I got there early, great audience, but I picked up very early that Giuliani was in for a rough old ride. He came in, we got in the green room, a diminutive man, very smart, very sober, not the most charismatic, and we seemed to hit it off. And he said to me, what do the audience think of me? Time for a bit of honesty. Told him the truth. You're not their favourite person. They're not sure that the minorities had a fair crack of the whip in New York when you were mayor there. He said, do you think I can win them over? I said, I think you can. I really think you can. How do you suggest I do that? Story. Stories work. You need to connect with them. You need to touch them. As I said, he wasn't the most charismatic person I've ever worked with. And he said to me, buy me 5 minutes. I went outside, I was tap dancing with the audience, keeping them going. I looked to my right, I could see him coming down, and he said he was ready. I introduced him. He did something I've not seen a speaker do before. He walked right to the edge of the stage, right to the front. So there was nothing between him and the audience. He didn't go to the lectern. He stood right in front of them. And he told this story. He said he grew up in 1960s New York. At the time of the civil...
catch that. Could you try again?
Would you believe my phone's playing up with me? But at the time of the civil rights uprisings, and America was a very different place to the place it was that day. He said he was about 8 years old, and his father had said to him, son, these civil rights activists are a bunch of communists and they're dangerous for America. And by far the most dangerous of the lot is Martin Luther King. As history would have it, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, it was announced that Martin Luther King was coming down to speak to thousands of people at Central Park, New York. Giuliani's father said to him, son, I want you to come and listen to this man and hear how dangerous he really is. They're standing in the hot sun. Martin Luther King is on the podium. He's electrifying the audience. He's holding his father's hand, and after 15 minutes, he looks up and a tear falls down his father's eye. 20 minutes later, he's holding his father's hand. His father's hand is getting hot, sweaty, and clammy. At the end of the talk, they're walking out, they're leaving together, and his father says, son, we've just been in the presence of greatness. That man stands for one thing and one thing only. He said, no matter how bad things got, he always managed to turn the other cheek. No matter how bad it got with his people, remember, in those times, beatings, shootings, lynchings, rapings. Him and his people always managed to turn the other cheek. So much so they went on to shame a nation and to change its stance on civil rights. I ask you all today, no matter how tough this gets, we can work our way through this. No matter how difficult it gets, we can get through to the exit. What will the world be like there? Honestly, hand on heart, none of us know. Everyone talks about this new normal. I'm not sure it's going to be normal, but I know we can get there. What I leave you all with is think about all the times you're communicating with your people. Some clarity, some certainty, some hope. Stay strong, stay safe, look out for each other, look after each other. Thank you very much for listening to me. Back to you, Neil.
Rennie, thank you so much for that. Yeah, stories are powerful, as you say, and a lot there that's been causing reactions and questions to come in from our listeners. For me personally, it was inspiring to hear. It's funny how words jump out when you listen to someone, and we had honesty, we had hope, we had trust, very emotive terms that I think sometimes people in my business and the analytics world struggle to connect with as well as they should. I also took me back to my fortunate days as an Eisenhower Fellow when in the speech at the end of that, Colin Powell, as it was then, said to us all, look, you say you're a leader. Do you know the name of your cleaner? If you don't, you're not, which really resonated with me with your story about
I love that, Neil. I love that.
Brilliant story. And also, I think in the current times about hygiene, etc., it has extra resonance. So look, a couple of questions coming in. I'll start you with an easy one. Jacqueline Bates-Gaston asks, although I think it's really Kevin wants to know this, What did you say to inspire the 5 and 6-year-olds on that day? This is probably to help him with his Peppa Pig dilemmas.
You know, it's fascinating. Jacqueline, it's a great question, great insightful question. I took myself back to when I sat down in a similar place when I was their age. And I remember not having a clue, sharing with them, I didn't have a clue of what I wanted to do. This was such an opportunity for them that next door, there was a bunch of people that would share with them what they could be. But I gave them the little qualifier, as long as you work hard at school. So everything I shared with them was as long as you work hard at school. But I tell you what, that is so much harder an audience than any MBA class you can find anywhere.
I can imagine. Yes, when I was at school, not at primary school now, my 2 life's ambitions were to be lead guitarist for Guns N' Roses or centre forward for Arsenal. Turns out I was useless at both of those things, so I ended up in economics. Another great question coming in here, which I think is really resonating, a bit of a tougher one. Richard, Bevan, and a couple of others have asked a similar theme here. A lot of people feel that the communication's now been made a little bit more difficult being done remotely. And also because the news is difficult, doing that at a distance is harder when you can't read the room. So any tips that during this crisis and pandemic conditions, what sort of messaging or ways of doing that, particularly for those who are maybe having to do it with this new distance that they didn't have to deal with before?
This is a brilliant question, because obviously we say you can smell people in the room, you can't smell them over the broadband. But what you can do is create the context. You create the atmosphere. You create the energy. So I would say before you have any sort of communication, set the context. Create a positive atmosphere. Last night we had 2 examples. Over the pond in the States, we had the president saying something like, this was more damaging than Pearl Harbor, COVID-19, and more damaging than 9/11. I'm not sure that's the context to start any communication with. I don't know where you go with that. Whereas we've got a context over here in the UK where we have just overtaken Italy as the highest number of deaths in Europe. That's not where to start a conversation at all. We've been told that the Prime Minister is now going to loosen some of the restrictions on the lockdown. That's where to start it. To talk about that, talk about the implications, talk about the hope, but don't be afraid to give the message that, we still need to be really careful. So for me, set the context, create a positive atmosphere, even if you have to deal with the tough stuff. Don't just walk in and think that you can, and I would also say, don't avoid the brutal honesty, but wrap it in positivity and hope.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that's important for all of our leaders listening, that one of your jobs is to find the hope in there, even if it is delivering a tough message. They're looking to you for some of those ideas or solutions, or at least your willingness to take some solutions from them as well. One other question that's been coming in, which I think touches on something very interesting, is you mentioned the sort of clarity, certainty, and hope. And one thing that we find, give a personal story, our own EY leader, managing partner Frank O'Keefe, had done one speech about, and it had been in the tone of some of the real challenges it was going to bring. And he did something that I find very inspiring. They came back the next day and said, we maybe overdid that a bit. They took a bit of the feedback that maybe made people feel a bit frightened and actually said, look, guys, maybe we were in the moment and we said something more than we should, or we maybe weren't as upbeat as we could have been. Let's think about what good is happening. And that was a really inspiring thing for me, for someone to hold up and say, look, maybe we're stepping into unknown territory and we maybe will make a few missteps along the way. So I think for some who maybe are in that boat on the call now, maybe they've said something, they've tried to maybe work with the staff, it hasn't quite worked. When you make mistakes and it's at a distance, any tips for how to rectify that, or how to bring people back on board if you've maybe pushed it a bit far, or maybe, as you just alluded to, started the narrative maybe in the wrong place?
2 things. I think the only mistake is one you don't learn from. The real rule is fess up about it. The leader's taking their team into the darkest jungle. There's malaria, there's dengue fever, there's mosquitoes. They're chopping through the undergrowth. It's 4 days. They're running out of water. Everyone's dripping in sweat. Everyone's getting tetchy. The leader climbs up the tallest tree, looks around and says, hey guys, sorry, wrong jungle. Now, in actual fact, you'd think that what an idiot. No, people will trust him even more for being brutally honest with them. And as soon as you've realised you've made a mistake, fess up. Just fess up. It means people will trust you more, respect you more. People think that saying I got it wrong is a sign of weakness. Believe you me, it's a sign of strength.
Thank you. That sounds like a perfect note. And if admitting you've got a forecast wrong is a sign of strength, then I'm feeling good about myself here. So they're all looking good. Rennie, thank you so much. We will hear from Rennie later on when we bring all our panelists back together. So do please keep the questions coming, and thank you for those who have sent them in. So moving on, we're going from Rennie into our next speaker, who I have had the privilege of listening to before. He's originally from Northern Ireland and has since travelled the world, as spending over 30 years in the Formula One industry, 15 years on management boards for Jordan Grand Prix, Red Bull Racing. He's worked with some of the legends we would all know, Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, and his recent best-selling book, The Business of Winning: Strategic Success, From Formula One Track to the Boardroom. This is a man who knows how to keep the time, so he was trusted with slides, unlike me, where you'd have still been here at 10 o'clock tonight. And it's my great pleasure to hand you over now into the capable hands of Mr. Mark Gallagher. Take it away, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, for the very nice and kind introduction. By the way, Neil, you were saying to me earlier on this morning that maybe your timekeeping wouldn't be just spot on. You finished your speech 4 seconds before you were due to. So I can say from a Formula One perspective, you were spot on with your timings. Well done. Good morning, everyone. A great pleasure to have the opportunity to contribute to Galvanise. I think it's a fantastic initiative that Kevin and the team have put together, and wonderful to hear Rennie. Again, we have shared this platform at a couple of events over the years, and it never fails to inspire and amaze and entertain and educate in equal measure. I'm coming to you from Oxfordshire, from rural middle of England, about 10 minutes from Silverstone race circuit. And the reason I live here is I'm at the epicenter of the Formula One industry, and really, we're in the middle of what is Silicon Valley, I suppose, for Formula One. So we have 8 Formula One teams within about a 45-minute drive of where I live. We're talking about 10 to 11,000 full-time employees. We're talking about 23,000 people in our supply chain, so directly or indirectly involved in the industry. And the industry at the moment has ground to a complete standstill. And so COVID-19's impact on us as a sector is every bit as dramatic as it is for all of you at home in Northern Ireland, dealing with the economic fallout and the consequences for all of your businesses. And so really very much my presentation is all about how we as a sector are responding to the current crisis, and also how we have dealt with crises in the past, because this is not the first time that we have faced what has appeared to be, in some cases, an existential crisis. And I think it's when you experience those moments in your life and in your career that it helps you to develop the necessary resilience as an individual, and then also hopefully as a business. The resilience necessary to adapt, to actually embrace what is happening all around us, and then for your business to have the agility to work through the problems that you're facing, and actually to come out the other side arguably stronger. And I know it's difficult to talk about thriving in the midst of a crisis, but very much the experience that we have had in an industrial sector like Formula One is that each of the crises that we have faced have actually made us stronger in the long run. And it's enabled the business leaders within our sector, it's enabled the sector itself to learn how to cope with what's in front of us. What you've got on the screen there is my first slide. That's the product that we make in our factories. And whether you work in manufacturing or service businesses, the reality is we're all producing something of value that we sell to our customers. We happen to manufacture a big complex piece of engineering, which is a Formula One racing car. but we will typically employ 800 to 1,000 full-time staff in our factories. And those staff are all engaged in design, manufacturing, quality control, supply chain management, marketing, finance, all the functions that you would expect in any technology manufacturing business. And the fact that COVID-19 has caused this to come to a complete standstill does, for our employees, very much feel like a worrying time, a time of uncertainty. And I mention the employees first, because first and foremost, as leaders in Formula One, we focus on our people who work for us, the contractors who rely on us in many cases to sustain their own businesses, and then right down through our supply chain. So for all that we talk about manufacturing and technology in Formula One, first and foremost, we remember as leaders, it is a people business. And that's why I'm very interested and very happy to hear Neil and Rennie both talk about the importance of people and well-being and health, and how we need to be honest with people at a time like this. This is my sector. So here are the 10 organizations that compete within the business known as Formula One. Some of the brand names are very familiar. Hopefully most of you, if not all of you, have heard of Ferrari. It's the most famous automotive brand in the world. And I built that brand through Formula One since 1950. Also on the screen, you have specialists who have specialized in Formula One since their creation, companies like McLaren and Williams. We also have major automotive players like Mercedes-Benz and Renault. And you can imagine how the automotive industry is feeling at the moment after a month in which car sales in the UK declined by 97%. Absolutely unprecedented shock to that sector. And then you have the disruptors in our business like Red Bull. And I was part of the management at Red Bull when they came in and bought a Formula One team and turned what was an uncompetitive team into 4 times world champions. And when people ask me about how an organization like Red Bull can take on the might of Ferrari or Mercedes-Benz and win, I can promise you it comes down to leadership, it comes down to teamwork, and it most definitely comes down to investing in our people to create the right environment to deal with the challenges that we face as a business on a day-to-day basis. And actually, those self-same behaviors are really what are standing us in good stead at the moment when we face the impact of COVID-19. It is all about people. It's all about communicating. It's all about helping each other to find a path through this crisis and to get ourselves to hopefully a better place in the not too distant future. And just to give you a little bit of an insight into how dramatic the impact on us has been, and for all of those employees and for all those organizations in my sector, consider the fact that although 8 of the 10 teams have headquarters or major facilities here in the Midlands of England, the reality is our market is global. This is the marketplace that we provide our technology into through a sporting entertainment event on 22 Sundays a year. It's a world championship. So Formula One is very much attuned to the fact that we live in a global village, that we deliver our products and our services and our entertainment and all the good things that we do are being delivered around the world. And this global event, this pandemic, which has overtaken us, has caused what you see in front of you to have the pause button pressed. We are unable to operate. China was supposed to be the 4th round of this year's Formula One World Championship. And as we know, the pandemic started in China and then quickly proliferated around the globe, across Asia, then into the Gulf region, into Europe, and finally into the Americas. And of course, it's been air travel and travel that has really helped the pandemic to spread so quickly. And of course, Formula One's all about travel and all about taking people around the globe. So this very much cuts to the core of why we have had to stop all operations. So what's happening? How are we dealing with it? Well, this is not the first time, as I said, that we have faced existential crisis. And we've learned the importance of communicating when you're in a crisis, communicating with your employees, your suppliers, taking your customer communications actually to a new level. Because if you're having difficulties, we all know our customers are equally in the same boat. We're all at home on lockdown, wondering what the future holds. So there are deep opportunities here when you actually talk to your customers at a further level, because actually they want to tell you why they can't do business with you currently, how they hope to do business with you in the future, or maybe even not how they can do business with you in the future. Point is, it's all about getting information. And this plays exactly to Renee's point about being brutally frank and honest in a time of crisis. Not negative, but just being honest. And when you're talking to your suppliers, when you're talking to your employees, when you're talking to your customers, we have learned it's really important to be clear about what is happening. The first crisis we faced was the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. Major technology companies folded, particularly affected North America. And in Ireland, in the island of Ireland, we saw companies like Nortel Networks and Lucent Technologies hit the wall. And those were major investors in Formula One. They actually invested in technology solutions. They were also major sponsors of our sport. And we lost those customers overnight. But we were pretty relaxed because we thought, well, our business model is fairly robust. We've got a big bunch of customers who love us, and they're going to continue to do business with us. And that was the tobacco companies. And those of you in Northern Ireland, of course, I grew up in Belfast. And I remember very well the Gallagher factory up in Ballymena and down in York Street when I was growing up. And of course, those factories are gone. And Gallagher Tobacco was a major sponsor of one of my teams, Jordan Grand Prix, through their brand Benson and Hedges. Well, we woke up in 2002 and found that the European Union was banning tobacco sponsorship and advertising, and that meant that we had 36 months notice of the fact that we were going to lose up to 70% of our revenue for some of the teams. Now, to put this into perspective, 7 of the competitors in Formula One at the time were sponsored by big tobacco companies, and the ban on tobacco advertising and sponsorship felt to us like, frankly, the end of the world. I have a distinct recollection of sitting in my office wondering what all my employees would be doing in a couple of years' time. I couldn't see how we would survive this. The interesting thing is what happened next. No sooner had we begun to tackle that crisis than the financial crisis of 2008 hit us. And that really was the third massive blow in that decade. We saw the banking sector decimated. We lost all of our sponsors and investors from the banking sector. The automotive industry was badly affected. We lost BMW and Honda and Toyota from Formula One. Job losses left, right, and center. Teams actually closing down their doors, putting their businesses up for sale. It felt like Armageddon. On top of that, we have, over the last decade, faced a crisis of what's happening to the planet that we in Formula One travel all around every year, and that our customers and our fans are deeply concerned about. So suddenly environmental sustainability became a central conversation for everything that we're doing. And I can promise you, trying to sell Formula One in a world where environmental sustainability is a top priority became a difficult sell because, we burn fossil fuel, we burn rubber, we seem to burn the planet live on television every other Sunday. And so we've had to address that issue, turning 180 degrees from being businesses which apparently destroyed the environment into companies that innovate solutions which can help us to tackle the environment and provide solutions to society. We've also seen changes in the media landscape. Sporting events like Formula One are not watched on live terrestrial television, anything like they used to be. The numbers have plummeted. That's because people are choosing to watch it on pay-per-view platforms or on devices or on streaming or on demand. And so we're seeing lots of changing consumer behaviors that have fundamentally questioned the way that we do business. And finally, we have COVID-19. What I can tell you and what I can share with you from all of those crises is that, interestingly, the final part of what we learned, having communicated with our customers, our suppliers, our employees, was actually talking to people in our own sector, talking to our competitors, coming together as organizations and saying, how can we work together to solve these problems? And that's become something quite unusual within Formula One. We are bitterly competitive, of course, when we're in the heat of battle on a Sunday afternoon. But actually, we do talk to each other. And in fact, on a monthly basis, there are meetings where we talk about risks to our sector, to our industry, how we're going to cope with those, how we can share best practices, what innovations and learnings can be shared that will be to ultimately the benefit of all of us. And that seems counterintuitive, but I promise you, it has been one of the most interesting opportunities that we have seen within our business. We've also reevaluated what we do. Everything you see on that screen basically amounted to our business model breaking. The business model we'd relied on for 40 years fell apart. And so we've had to evaluate our capabilities. What are our skills? What value do we provide to our customers? What markets and sectors can we move into? And is there an opportunity potentially to diversify in the midst of this crisis? And that's one of the reasons why Formula One teams today no longer rely on selling sponsorship to tobacco companies. We sell technology goods and services into industry. The Williams Formula One team sells energy efficiency solutions into supermarkets. They sell electric vehicle technology, including for electric bicycles, electric cars, buses, transport systems. They make aerospace technologies for British Aerospace, including cockpit flight simulators. They make healthcare products. And all of those products stem from Williams sitting down and evaluating their core capabilities as a fast-moving, rapid prototyping engineering business. So the fact that we can produce amazing Formula One cars every year for ourselves means that we can also produce amazing technology solutions for customers. And in reaching out to customers and having those conversations during difficult times, it unlocked opportunities for us to create new product lines, revenue streams, and opportunities, which after those crises had calmed down, suddenly led to a permanent change and a more sustainable business for us, one better able to cope with future shocks to our industry. When COVID-19 came along, some of you will have seen on television and on the internet, Formula One put together Project Pitlane. The idea being that we would produce components for ventilators, contribute to the UK government's ventilator challenge. The Mercedes Formula One team repurposed one of their entire factories, one of the Formula One factories, completely repurposed for the manufacturing of continuous pressure positive airway systems, CPAP breathing aids of the kind that you see here. This is exactly the product that they're producing. So this is a face mask which allows the patient to have pressurized air pumped into them. And what the Italian healthcare system discovered very early on in the COVID-19 crisis was that actually CPAP machines can provide perfect assistance to patients rather than the more invasive ventilators. Mercedes-Benz reverse engineered an existing product in partnership with University College London in 100 hours of engineering. And after 100 hours, they were able to provide to the healthcare authorities here in the UK a buying up-to-date 21st century manufactured CPAP breathing aid for evaluation. It immediately passed the quality checks, and they have now been producing thousands of these machines and breathing aids in recent weeks. People have asked us, how is it possible that you can do that so quickly? It's because we're prepared for it. We know how to repurpose. We have the agility. We know that an inherent part of resilience is looking at how you deploy your core competencies potentially in new ways to new customers and in new markets, and help to deal with the challenge that confronts us. Connectivity is providing a major source of the solutions that we're seeing all around us. Formula One is a data-driven environment. Neil and I were talking earlier on this morning about the fact we were at the data analytics a conference down in Dublin late last year. And data has been as a source, and connectivity has been the source of so many of the advances that we have seen within our industry in the last 25 years. Formula One car on the racetrack is sharing its data with the leadership team. The leadership team is being supported by data analysts locally, looking at the information that's coming in real time from our actual product on the racetrack and in the environment within which we're competing. And then all of that information is being relayed back to our mission control being relayed remotely from wherever we are in the world. All that data and audio and video is being relayed remotely back to our strategists and leadership team back at our headquarters. And that's where the real decisions are made. The real decisions are not being made at the racetrack. The strategy decisions are being made back at headquarters with algorithms supporting us in being able to make fast, rapid decisions that guarantee positive outcomes. And then finally, that information is shared back with the leadership team and they speak to the driver. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is that, again, through the development of these technologies has emerged huge opportunity at the current time. Because one of the impacts of the data-driven connected environment that we have in Formula One is that we have moved from an analog world where Formula One cars were driven by drivers using steering wheels to steer the car, to providing drivers with a steering wheel which is actually more like a device. It's more like a console. It's a device on which we have all the functionality and applications and connectivity necessary to optimize performance, to manage risks, and to do the things that we need to do remotely. And I think at the current time, what's happening for a lot of businesses is a realization that some of these online tools that maybe we had begun to take for granted actually are now providing critical resource and opportunities for us. And yesterday I spoke to a number of technology companies about this very topic, about the way in which business is really going to appreciate the opportunities afforded by this connected environment and what will emerge from it. And in Formula One's case, this move from analog to digital has created a new wave of opportunities because we now have Formula One drivers like Max Verstappen. This is the young Dutchman who drives for Red Bull Racing. And apart from being a Formula One driver, he's a computer gamer. He games online every evening and at weekends. He meets friends and colleagues and fans, and they race each other online. And of course, this has all been great fun in recent years, but now it's very real business, because we decided to launch a virtual Formula One World Championship just a few weeks ago. And that virtual Formula One Championship has literally taken off. We have hundreds of thousands of online users, online gamers coming to watch the races online and actually being able to participate in the races using their own gaming consoles and that fully connected environment. And yesterday, the commercial director of Formula One admitted that for him, the silver lining of what's currently happening with COVID-19 is that while the real racing has stopped, the virtual racing has taken off as a new opportunity and one that will have permanent implications for the way that we engage with our fans who are our customers. I just want to finish by coming back to talking about people, because as leaders, this is a very important time to lead with confidence, with empathy, and with curiosity for ourselves and with our colleagues about finding the solutions, because none of us know all of the answers. I had the privilege of spending some time with Lewis Hamilton, 6 times Formula One world champion, a couple of months ago. And just again, in a throwback to Rennie Kerry, Lewis is a big fan of the Black American poet, African American poet, Maya Angelou. He carries the word "Still I Rise" from her very famous poem on his helmet. And talking about the point that Rennie made, that Maya famously said that people will never forget how you made them feel. I asked Lewis Hamilton a question, which was, how do you behave as a leader in times of difficulty in your career and with your team? He said, Mark, the biggest thing that I've learned during my career is that when you're in a position of leadership, you have to communicate with your feelings, your impression, your facial expression, the words that you use. He said, it is up to us to communicate the right mood. And he said, I now realize when I walk into the team in a bad mood, I bring everyone down. I realize even if I'm finding turmoil inside, if I go in and I project a positivity, that has a massive effect on the team. And he said, it's been one of my biggest career lessons. He said, I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve. And he said, but I've realized that that's not always a good thing in the team environment. I need to motivate, inspire, lead, provide an anchor point for the team. And that was his biggest takeaway. And I thought it was a fascinating kind of point for Lewis to have made about how he, as just a racing driver, understands that for him to win, he needs the support of all of those people, and that he has a fundamental task to do in terms of leading and inspiring. Just to conclude, we have learned in Formula One to communicate with customers, suppliers, employees, and competitors. We have learned how to evaluate what are our core capabilities, skill sets, markets, and sectors. And we've learned how to innovate, use technologies to diversify, the power of digital transformation, to change how we operate, including remotely, so that we can get a better and guaranteed outcome. And finally, we've accelerated how to thrive in times of crisis, how to take the lead by being confident, by having empathy with our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers, and our competitors, and ultimately being curious to help find the solutions that will see us come out so positively on the other side of this crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for that. It was inspiring as always, and lovely, I think, for Mercedes to get that story about their 100 hours turnaround in production after their faulty cigarette lighter story earlier. So I think that'll have them back on side with us.
Yeah, I think
just
so too.
Time for a couple of very quick questions. Terrific one from Kiva Murta here, who asks a little bit about how to take you back, just to paraphrase her question, when you had that moment when you felt, what are my employees going to be doing in 2 years' time at the height of previous crises? Many of the leaders on this call will be feeling that right now. They're feeling the uncertainty and nervous. Any tips for them as you find your way? How did you find the way to lead when you yourself were feeling very uncertain and nervous?
By talking to other leaders in our sector, including talking to competitors. And in the case of Formula One, we at that time, we created actually working groups of organizations in our industry to talk about how we would plot our way through the drama and the crisis that we were facing. And by sharing our concerns and our thoughts and our ideas, we began to plot a path forward. I think the other thing that was very interesting was that I had a few occasions on which I was feeling quite negative about the whole situation. And then after a conversation with some employees, I suddenly felt more positive because we feed off each other. And I remember one guy who was actually one of our much more mature employees. He was coming up towards retirement. And I remember him coming into my office and saying, Mark, I've worked in this industry for nearly 40 years. He said, you'll all be fine. You'll come out of it the other. He said, this is not going to go away. He said, as long as society continues, there'll be a demand for sport. We'll find another way to fund it. And just a very simple word like that from a very respected colleague. He actually worked in our stores department. And I remember coming away from that conversation. So I think, again, it comes down to communicating, talking, sharing our concerns and our fears. And I think at this moment, particularly of remote working on lockdown, it's really important we use all the tools available to us to communicate.
Brilliant. And I think that's something we heard from Rennie as well this morning, about taking that guidance from different people that you mightn't have expected. I think your story about talking to competitors might resonate with a lot of people. Last question from me before we bound for coffee. We'll be coming back to you later on as well. There's some really good questions about innovation I want to pick up later. But just one to slightly change the mood a little bit. You're obviously in sport, and that plays a very important part in people's lives. My own father-in-law, shower fitter, just about to reach his retirement. He's one item on his bucket list, and that's to go to Silverstone. He loves the Grand Prix. All he ever wants to do is come down to the house here and watch it every Sunday when it's on. It plays a big role for people, whether that's football, American football, whether it's Formula One. Do you feel that sense of responsibility too about bringing a little bit of, a lot of our conversations as leaders are very serious and challenging at the moment. You also have that ability to bring some joy and happiness to people. I'm sure that plays an important part as well when we think about just these tough times. I suppose it might be nice to hear your positivity about bringing back that joy to many people's lives that your sport clearly does.
Well, there's two parts to my answer to that, Neil. The first part is that we have actually spent the last 6 weeks trying to bring as much joy to fans as possible, and again using the digital tools available to us. So, for example, individual Formula One drivers have been using social media to be interviewed from their home, to answer fan questions, to engage with people, and we've been using every tool available. I would actually argue that the accessibility to Formula One for our fans has increased exponentially in the last 6 weeks because everyone is so keen to motivate people and inspire them. But to come back to your broader point, yesterday I was talking with the commercial director of Real Madrid, commercial director of Formula One. We had an online meeting, and the number one topic was that our urgency to get things back into action, even if we are having races and sporting events behind closed doors, the importance for us as businesses to do that is the benefit it will bring wider society. And the fact that people will be so happy to be able to be entertained with something that's happening live and real time, and actually to see the responsible ways in which we continue to practice social distancing, and that we as businesses can actually put on our show and operate under very, very different circumstances with unfortunately no spectators present. And that's why in July we're having 4 Formula One races, but actually only at 2 venues. One in Austria, so we're having 2 Austrian Grand Prix on consecutive weekends because the Austrian government have given us permission to do that behind closed doors. And actually we're having 2 events at Silverstone. So we're changing how we operate completely in order to put events on and bring excitement and joy to our fans around the world.
Fantastic. Well, that seems a nice upbeat message to head us into coffee, and also a lesson for all of those businesses out there who are also having to think of new ways of doing what they're doing. So look, we're going to take a quick comfort break. Unusually, I don't have to tell you where to go to access the toilets or the Danish or the coffee or whatever it is you want to make yourself. But in order to keep us to time, I'm going to try and get us back here in just a few minutes. So please do come back as quickly as you can. Reminder to keep asking questions for us. We'll have all the panelists back at the end. We need to go out to full screen to do that. So we're only at half time. We will be coming back in just 3 or 4 minutes. So please go take a little comfort break. And I'm not allowed to regale you with the guitar in the background. You're going to have some little music to keep you company. And I'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're feeling suitably refreshed. I've just seen Kevin tucking into a banana and a nice iced water. As you can tell by my physique, I went for the fizzy drink and chocolate to lift me up for the afternoon session. It's been terrific feedback we've got this morning. Keep the questions coming, please. We will have all our panelists back after we hear from our final inspirational speaker. But we heard at the beginning that these events only take place by those who support us and help MLN and the network to put these events together. We heard from Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council this morning. And now we're going to hear from 2 other organisations who played a crucial role in making this event possible. Shortly, we'll hear from Vincent McIver from Hermes Insurance. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Una Murtagh, who will say a few words on behalf of our sponsor, Danske Bank. Una.
Thank you, Neil. I'm delighted to welcome everybody here today to this conference, which Danske Bank is so pleased to support. I want to start by thanking everybody who's worked so hard to make it happen, especially our colleagues at MLN. We most certainly are in challenging, unprecedented times, with each and every one of us so worried about the health, safety and well-being of our family, our friends and our loved ones. But it is also an equally challenging time for businesses right across Northern Ireland. And that is why today it's so important that we have the opportunity to hear from world-class renowned speakers. And hopefully we will get some inspiration that will be much needed when we come out the other side of this crisis. Our own focus at Danske Bank has been supporting our colleagues, supporting our customers, and doing the right thing for our society. Never before has strong leadership been so important, and that is something we value highly at Danske Bank. We have approved over £120 million worth of coronavirus-related business support loans since mid-March, with over 64 million of that sum being sanctioned under the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. And from Monday the 4th of May, we have been busy processing and approving bounce-back loans. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues at Danske Bank who have been working so hard to support their customers. And now I would like to hand over to my fellow MLN champion, Vincent McIver from Hermes Insurance.
Thanks, Una. Hermes Insurance are delighted to be part of this summit today, and I must commend Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council for having the foresight to put on an event such as this in the current circumstances, but also MLN for having the ability to actually organise it in such a short space of time. Hermes cover a wide range of organisations throughout Northern Ireland, from our public sector, our councils, for example, through to a wide variety of private firms, from transport logistics, construction, manufacturing, among others. We've seen the impact that difficulties this pandemic has had to all those firms and organisations over the last few weeks. And we're proud to have had the ability to be able to adjust our working requirements to be able to service our customers and quite literally keep them on the road, keep them working and keep the economy moving. I recently became president of the Insurance Institute of Northern Ireland, and my theme for the year was Stronger Together. We've seen over the past few weeks how our business community has reacted, and we've seen that when we do come together and when we do support each other, what we can all achieve together is brilliant. Today's summit is another example of this. I'm not sure in normal circumstances if MLM would have wanted to or even thought of streaming live a summit to this degree to such an audience. But again, this situation makes us all appreciate what we can achieve, and it also makes us appreciate what we already have. I know from this morning's session I've already learned a few things that I'll take away, and I'm really looking forward to the second half. So I'm sure you guys are all looking forward to it as well. So on that note, please let me hand back over to Neil. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Vincent. And I had a great privilege just last week of being on a panel with Danske Bank's ONA chief economist in Northern Ireland, Conor Lamb. So do check out some of his recent commentary and writing as well on the economic situation that we're facing, a good, insightful thinker on the issues. So we're moving into the third of our keynote speeches now. We're delighted to say that we have one of the UK's most successful entrepreneurs on with us. She started her first company, Pacific Direct Limited, at the age of just 23, when I was still trying to find my way around a spreadsheet. She's guided her company through SARS, foot and mouth, 9/11, so knows a little bit about dealing and managing and leading through crises. Best-selling author, regular visitor and great friend to Northern Ireland and to the MLN network. She now looks at how to invest in other companies where she can bring value. It's my great privilege and pleasure to hand you over to Lara Morgan. Take it away, Lara.
Thank you, Neil. And actually, thank you, everybody, for dialing in, because just to say for the first time, the stop and the listen to others who perhaps I have a little bit of blood, sweat and tears and certainly grey hairs. Maybe some of the best self-invested time that you can make. And I have to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed learning and listening to Rennie and to others on the call, because it's a good chance to rethink. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly talk about how very short term, I hope you now have sort of done overhead control, line by line cost analysis. Just a quick example, we even looked at every single app that some of my companies have subscribed to and saved up to £504 for one company alone on a monthly app charge. So that line by line, that every single thing you pay for, overhead control should have been done. If it hasn't been done, whatever you do, make it the first thing you do to really get lean in current times, because we do not know what the future holds. It's extraordinary times. It's hospitality that I come from. You're very happy to ask me questions about the past, but I actually really want to talk about the potential of some of the unlock opportunity that innovative, quick thinking, brave, fake it till you make it people may find, certainly, though costed before you leap. And I'm going to get to that. So many of you will have been playing catch up because it's unprecedented times. Don't forget to look after your supply chain, as some people have mentioned. But also, do not think of only the now. The medium term is important, but so is looking at behavioral change. And whilst you can make some quick wins for the short term, do not sacrifice what you have built so far. I think fewer, stronger competitors will come out of the shutdown. So you and your teams need to be lean. And whilst it is utterly brutal and hideous letting people go, it requires brutal honesty to cut once and cut deep, meaning if you have to really, really reduce your overhead base, look at the multi-skilling ability of people that you have in your business at the moment and really opt, like I did when, frankly, Osama bin Laden more than rained on my parade. Really cut out those that cannot multitask, those that are not culturally a fit, and then be brutally honest with yourself about every single ounce of the day and how you look at what you're doing and tackle the stuff that's the must-have immediate. I started off 7 weeks ago by writing sort of stop, later, and now. And it's really simple, because the now gets you to a place where hopefully you're no longer afraid, but you're starting to think on the front foot, because we will unlock. And the small business agility gives small business leaders enormous upside against some of the bigger companies and the giants, where leadership is still, frankly, not really looking straightforward. And I think you should be optimistic about agility and the speed at which you can innovate over others. And that's certainly that my small companies, and I'm so proud of my leadership and the way they have, first of all, stabilized the business and done a root and branch review, looked at credit lines. And by the way, I hope Neil will agree with me, but whilst money is going cheap, get the money. It is important, if it is realistic, that you can use money soundly and you have a good balance sheet and a good idea of your P&L. If there's an opportunity to get a bounce back loan, take it, because it could really help you accelerate and re-employ. By the way, I did re-employ several people after September the 11th, and that is something to think about, that, this isn't necessarily a forever, it may be a short term, and I'm very proud that some of those people are still with me today. So energize, you need transparency, it's been mentioned. You also need to look at your relationships. One of the relationship areas that I think a lot of people forget is the supply chain. I mean, we've already made amazing improvements on our online direct-to-consumer bundling, and we've had to go to box suppliers to change the way we sell and package our products. And it sounds pathetic, but we've saved probably 6,800 quid in one business over a month, where my yoga brand business has just grown off the charts. And these things come at you as surprises, but get the commerciality and the rigor of the supply chain that can help you, because they're also in trouble. And actually, by pairing together and come up with good ideas and treating them as team members, you'll get better outcomes. Now, galvanizing. This conference is about galvanizing, and I want to talk about maximizing your organizational ability. And I'm going to talk to you about a magnificent 7. There are notes that will follow this up, and I'm very happy for them to be shared. But I think one of the best questions you can ask yourselves when you're brutally honest is, what does victory look like? What is it that you can do to get on the front foot that isn't abstract, it isn't survival, but actually it's setting the bar higher. It's about retargeting. And yes, we can talk about budgets that are shredded, but one of my companies is going to do 10 times growth and another company is in standstill. So the contrasts are vast for everybody. And I'm enormously empathetic for those of you that are looking at a blank sheet of paper. But actually, starting to look and act at the blank piece of paper is better than doing nothing. And inertia is not an option. So, have you written a journey in your sector of how a customer wants and needs to change over time? Have you literally mapped their journey? In the hospitality business, we're already developing a hygiene check-in kit. Let's imagine you're going to send a member of staff, or you yourself want to travel again. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to want to carry with product and artillery that's going to make you feel as if you've got your own hygiene control. Doesn't matter if a housekeeper's cleaned a room rigorously. You do not know that. You may want to clean it again. So we're looking at hospitality. We're also supplying sanitizer product, and we won't price gouge because we think long-term reputational damage is something to consider as you look at interesting challenges ahead. But you need to map consumer shift in behavior. Who's going to stay home more? Where are people going to go more? Where are they no longer going to go? What can you offer in the new reality of business? A question about your product. And actually, is your product fit for purpose anymore? Do you need to change the design? We are changing all the verbology, all the prioritization of our SEO in our product ranges, because hygiene, refreshing, washable, wipeable. How do we get on the front foot to own spaces where we can sell product with the right language for the right needs of how people are now thinking differently? How would you describe a new strategy to a 16-year-old, and would they understand it? Have you really got grasp of what you're trying to do in direct language, where a friend of mine quite rightly said to me when I was being an idiot the night before last, I was saying, should I still send some salespeople to America? And he said, what are you doing? Get them Zoom training. Make sure they've got the right backdrop. Make them the best Zoom operator that they can be. Make them better than any other at getting people to invite, and don't bother sending them to America because they could get trapped there. And the point is that, I got too close, and it sometimes takes another voice to guide you on what your strategy is. Get the voice of a 16-year-old. My distraction is around the fact that my 16-year-old's lucky to be alive because these times are stressful. Do our people have the right goods? Do they have the right artillery? Today, more than ever, the simplicity of your message, the brilliance of your pitch, and like others have said, the clarity and the certainty of your promise, your credibility, the way you lay things out, the speed of your customer service, your desire to do things quickly, the follow-up, the precision around you manage your pipeline, your prospecting. Go back through your diary, your black book, your network. Make your LinkedIn training more efficient. Do everything you can in time when you're down. I mean, literally this weekend, I'm pretty good at LinkedIn, and I certainly don't need more friends, but I have recorded a LinkedIn training plan because I don't think we're scaling our ability. You can always learn to fight a better day. And then the other thing that I think is really important is, as you look to a 6 and 12-month view, clearly it's very difficult. The table and chairs are still moving, but what could go wrong? And in that classic question, what usually could go wrong will go wrong. So what will you do? There are going to be obstacles. Life is not perfect. So pick the people that can help you overcome obstacles, and perhaps Perhaps have a war chest ready that says, what will I do in this event? And the certainty of just sense checking. So something I came across brilliantly, which I'll always give credibility to an organization where they talked about, if you've got a great new idea or a great new direction, before you launch it, do a pre-mortem and don't wait to do the post-mortem if it fails. This is the best thing that I can give you as a takeaway, other than reviewing your key performance indicators and looking at your hypothesis. Write down what you think could fail. And a new idea, what could die? What's going to go wrong? Have you got the right ethos? Are the right people going to be in the mix? And when you do that post-mortem, consider all the things that could have made the idea die that you should have been thinking about now. Who killed the idea? As in, who comes into your head that may not get buy-in? And do you want them in your team anymore? Who killed the idea? Could it be a supplier that's going to let you down, or you're not sure about? Should you provide a backup source? What's the survivor's biggest regret of something that you think you could do? You have a gut feeling that you might want to do, but you haven't done it yet. What should you have done to save it? What's a bulletproof? What's the backup? But also, don't spend too much time procrastinating. I actually wrote to one of my US presidents, that's the way they call these leaders of organizations in America. And I said to her, in the end, you can only have so much data and then you must act. And the people that act and go with the courage of their convictions and have the agility like water to flow around problems, they'll survive because they'll find that over, under, and around through mechanism. Stick to your values and your ethics, sense check what's necessary, and then communicate the hell out of the new way so that you become the Messiah and you remain grounded in your values. So in my case, I've got a great example of a friend who's literally pivoted their whole fruit and veg business to home delivery boxes because, frankly, their business was going down the tubes. Every great idea doesn't have to come from you. So the other thing, get lots of voices in the room, lots of voices brave enough to criticize the boss. And that's where you're going to test your culture. The flow, the rework, the information, the challenge, the critique, get people to give you feedback because a little bit of betterment goes an awful long way. And finally, I hope with new energy and new ideas and a better way forward, you look to pay back others around you. Do something that energizes you and your team. One of my brands, Centered, is extraordinarily overwhelmed by the amount of small companies giving small gifts for people waiting at home, working at home, balancing children. I mean, I've got mums with kids who are working 6 till 10, then do schoolwork. I've got dads doing the same thing. It's a hell of a juggle. Let's appreciate our staff more than ever before, because without our people, we are toast. And on that note, I hope you get real with your pre-mortem. You write a really good one-page plan. You share it liberally with the team that are staying. And then you preach like the Messiah and you sell your socks off. And if you're any doubt about selling your socks off, read a book called The Rainmaker, not the one by Jeffrey Archer. It is brilliant, and become a greater salesperson than you ever have before. That will be time well spent this weekend. I wish you well.
Thank you very much indeed, Lara. I'm going to bring all our panelists back in. I'm going to have a few questions that we've had coming through for Lara first, and then I'll bring some others to the rest of our team. Some terrific questions coming through, so apologies if I don't get to all of them. But you mentioned something there, and I want to get this one out of the way because it's a more challenging question. You mentioned about who might kill the ideas, and we've had some questions coming in. Martin asked actually early on in your speech about how do you deal with when you find some negativity, even at the leadership level? We're talking today as a family of leaders, but that presupposes all those leaders are being proactive and innovative and clever. What if the blocks actually lie at your leadership level team? People wanting to go back to how they always did it, not willing to embrace change. How do you deal with negative leadership traits?
I mean, candidly, I think this is a one-to-one. And I think Martin's asking this question because he's probably carrying someone. And, I've had friends and even one of my general managers who actually has really surprised me, like deer in the headlights, not thinking straight, not getting proactive, not getting energetic, not communicating enough, and thereby not leading with infectious enthusiasm. I mean, Jesus, do I have to fake it every morning? I was laughing when who was it? Mark was saying about I still rise with Lewis, and I'm thinking, you know, I have had days where I have come downstairs and I have just thought, God, I've never worked this hard. I am absolutely dog tired. And, you know, first of all, I have to look after myself. So whatever the question is, you have to have the right frame of mind. And then when you tackle the person that is the naysayer, that methodology, frankly, apologies for the language, but let's be clear, it's a bit of a shit sandwich. So never lose sight of the empathy for someone who may be really struggling and they may have other personal problems. And, you know, my mom is stuck in South Africa, and it worries me every day, but I have to remain positive. And so I try and find ways of saying, look, there are always some things someone's doing well, but you have to have a one-on-one and you have to go, look, you're either on board or we clear up issues and questions and we come to compromise, or you're off board, because actually you have very limited time. If your leadership aren't behind you now, change the leadership brutally. And, you know, you're in a great position to do that now, because you can make the difficult decisions, and you will know in your gut when you have made that decision, because your spirits will soar. And I'm sorry to say that, but sometimes that's the best conclusion of, you know, you're doing the right thing and it's fair to others, because one poor leader can infect a whole group. So take care.
Yes, very important words there. Thank you, because some are wrestling with that. You can always put these things off. And as you say, it's not an easy conversation, but even in these tough times, there's tough things to be done. Another question for you before I bring the others in. This is from Brian McGonigal, who asked a little bit about, you have a broad reach across sectors. You mentioned your yoga business doing so well. We can think of online and delivery, but what else have you seen? I mean, we're all trying to think about emerging tech and some of the things that are really doing well. Given your broad sectoral reach, could you give Brian and some of the people a flavour of just maybe some of the surprises you've seen out there, or people who are really flourishing even in this face of such a crisis?
I mean, I've been really impressed by one of my suppliers who makes you laugh. But, you know, 10 weeks ago, people were talking about trading face masks. Now, ethically, I refused to trade face masks because I felt the NHS needed them more than I needed to make the money. And I've been really disappointed by some people's behavior. But I've equally seen some really smart people in the office trade and in the acrylic and events trade. So there's no way there are events on, but these guys and girls, they produce really quickly acrylic screens. And a friend of mine approached me and he said, look, I can make protective screens for supermarkets. And he came to me and said, you know, reception desks in hotels are going to need clear dividers. You know, think about hygiene. Think about, you know, people's nervousness, people's anxiety. You know, I've also seen, a bit like Centered, my well-being brand. You know, you can't just send everybody a well-being candle, although I would suggest to you it'd be a good idea. But I've bought gift boxes of toys. They're not for my staff. They're for my staff to play with their children. And that came about through a toy company who's closed, right? And they're just going in and they're making up budget gift boxes. And, you know, I made a puzzle last weekend because I needed a moment of therapy and sanity. But actually, think of all the things that people are going to spend their money on next, because you go through this normalizing period. And, you know, think about bundling. Think about, I've seen hand sanitizer sold by a gin company. Actually, my web guys are doing a brilliant job, James Oakley Media. They have sold out of a gin and a sanitizer, because frankly, we all need a gin at the end of the day at the moment, or a glass of wine or a beer. And so why not sell it with hand sanitizer? You know, I think you've got to look at other products like, I mean, we're working with David Lloyd Gyms. If you think about gym companies, hygiene towels, sweat towels, events players, are they going to hand out cups that people don't want to wash anymore. I think if you literally wrote a map of human behavior about public facilities and shared items, there are a million new businesses. We've got a collapsible cup because we know that people aren't going to want to share hygienically something that somebody else has touched. Think of the touch and no touch economy. I think there's a huge amount to be gained there. I hope that helps in some way.
Yeah, and I think it does, certainly. And I think the important lesson you mentioned there, which ties back to your talk, was thinking long term as well. And we heard that this morning from Rennie as well, that actually things that will change will present us other opportunities, not just in the now, but in the beyond. So I think that's an important lesson, and looking at what people need to create those biosecure environments. So look, just bringing some of the others back in to bounce off that. Rennie, if I could turn to you, we had a question from Chris Marshall, which has talked a little bit about the new ways of working that we're seeing, maybe working more remotely, maybe we lock in some of this technology, maybe we don't travel as much. How do you see, Rennie, whether much of this change is going to be temporary or whether we'll actually lock in some, if you want to call them productivity gains, or are we really overplaying the changed world? Do you think we'll work differently, and what ways of working might change as a result of this crisis?
It's a really good, insightful question. There's room for the mixed economy. I'm not sure everyone marching into an office every morning, commuting back, is the way forward. And I'm not sure everyone working from home is the way forward. And, Zoom fatigue hits all of us. It's not every single issue, challenge, opportunity you want to be sitting facing 25 people for. There's nothing wrong with the old phone call. For some of us, sitting in front of a screen is really easy. For others, it's the most terrifying thing you ever do every day. For some of us, the commute into work every day is essential. I like meeting people. I like to freshen off the day. I like to get dressed. Horses for courses. I think as with everything we're doing at the moment, we're learning, we're practicing, we're seeing new opportunities. Don't lose the opportunity, but don't be too rigid either.
Thank you. Yes, I've put on myself to order a better backdrop for any of these things. So by the next time you all see me, I'll have some fake bookshelves to show off with. I've realized that this fake artwork guitar isn't really cutting it for this sort of session. Thank you, Rennie. I think that's important because we often have this proximity bias. We write in the moment and we write about what we're seeing now as if this is the way it's always going to look. But I can certainly say from many of our own EY staff, we invest in offices because there's a benefit from being close to people. You do like the social camaraderie. And certainly one of the important things is to help those businesses that rely on that camaraderie, the coffee shops, the restaurants around our business organizations, to help them when the time comes and is appropriate. Mark, if I could turn to you, a question came in from Alan Braithwaite earlier, who said, when you think of Formula One, you think innovation. And when we're under pressure, maybe working a bit differently, how have you continued to energize your teams to think creatively, innovatively, to accept ideas? And he also asked, how do you filter out the good from the bad? I think a lot of people have said it remotely. It's easier to give good news, but it can be quite difficult to disappoint someone. So how have you continued that spirit of idea generation and innovation when we're all working in a new, disparate environment?
Well, actually, I think this new and disparate environment lends itself very well to exactly this point of innovating and attracting ideas, because everyone pretty well is at home and spending a lot of time in their own sort of homes. So what you can effectively do is to consider creating, for example, an innovation working group. So this might be heads of department or functions, or people who are appointed by heads of different departments within their groups to form an innovation working group. And I've done that on a couple of occasions in the businesses that I've led, where we get people from across the business thinking about the things which are going to really make a difference. And we set the criteria. So it could be something that saves the company money, could be something that generates a new revenue opportunity, could be something that will add a valued service to a customer. It could be something really quite mundane about how we purchase products or services from suppliers, or maybe questioning how we deal with suppliers. The whole point of innovation is it doesn't have to be some massive ground-breaking technological breakthrough. Innovation can come from simply changing an existing way of doing things by a small alteration to a procedure or a process or a system. And actually, quite often, the best ideas will come from your employees who are working at the coalface of the business. And maybe they've spent the last few years thinking, I wish we did things a little bit differently in this area. Now is the time for them to bring their ideas. So set the criteria, give them an idea of the things that are really going to make a difference to your business, and then let them run with it. And if they come online from home to have a 20-minute Zoom meeting where they throw their ideas in, or they email their ideas in, and then you have a panel, leadership panel, which can actually judge which are the ones to run with. And then if there are ones that you aren't going to run with because it's financially not feasible or operationally too difficult, you have a reason to go back to them and say, great idea, love what you've come up with, but actually we're unable to do that just at the moment for the following reasons. And again, going back to the point that Rennie made earlier on, if you're going to break bad news to someone, just be brutally honest. People love being treated as an adult.
Thank you. Now we've got a few minutes left. We're just running over slightly, but we've got so many questions coming in. I want to give all the speakers a chance to give us some final remarks. So I've two little questions for each of you. I'll get each of you to respond to these, just little sharp thoughts. Now, the final question is going to be about the practices or habits that you have that really keep you motivated. Sinead Slane was asking us that, the little tricks that you have keep you going, but I'll give you a minute to think about that one. But one thing that's come out for me very much as a theme from today has been this sense of family or collegiality. I've been really struck by the amount of people mentioning talking to suppliers or competitors or feeling a little bit less. One of the reasons MLN exists is they exist as partly a family and a network where people can rely. But perhaps starting with yourself, Lara, successful, very successful entrepreneur and business leader. Who do you turn to? Who do you rely on at these times at the moment? The last few weeks, who've been your confidants and helped you at either those low moments or that you've celebrated success with? How have you kept the morale up? And who do you rely on in this time that maybe would be a good tip for our leaders to hear?
Actually, I think somebody already touched upon it. I thought it was a really insightful thing to say as well. I mean, other than obviously chocolate, which is, and I do go running to release the frustration at the end of the day. I kind of default to calling and having an open conversation because, and I've actually literally made a lot of phone calls across 6 companies that we're invested in. And I've got everything from a general manager who's furloughed himself and closed his business and shut up shop, all the way through to a general manager who is so embarrassed how much yoga equipment she's selling. She almost didn't want to be on the general manager's call. And the answer is that I pick different people at different points when I need a pick-me-up. And my culture is so strong and so equalized that I can actually say to them, I mean, I said to Sarah this morning at 7 o'clock, she's one of my mums, and that's doing these ridiculous hours. I said, you need a break. I phoned her and I felt knackered. And actually what I was saying to myself is, I need a break. And Sarah said back to me, so are you going to break? And I think there's something inherent in in great relationships in a good culture. So I think within your team, you have all the answers. I just think there's nothing wrong with being a bit vulnerable. I am going to have a break. I mean, thank God for VE Day. Genuinely, and I think we should all, give ourselves a break and remember that without us, the rest of the team isn't going to perform as well. But equally that I've got some young people in my organization who are astounding me because I'm saying to them, your voice is important. Come on, you've got great ideas. And actually tech-wise, they can help me every day of the week. So that, and, my husband is a great grounder at the end of the day. It's probably the only time I'm talking to him at the moment. I don't, we're really full on.
Thank you. I like the fact there that you mentioned mix up the people you're talking to for different voices, and you also said take a break yourself. A lot of the leaders in this call will be working incredibly hard. I'll be incredibly annoyed, however, if Kevin and MLN sent you that chocolate supply because I didn't get any. I will be deeply annoyed with Kevin after this if that's the case. Yeah, I'm feeling
personal survival tool. I mean, there's also
very jealous. Rennie, you mentioned earlier on today. As a man who's kept Rudy Giuliani calm on occasion, what's helped you through this difficult time? Where have you turned to for a bit of inspiration and leadership guidance yourself?
We should always remind us, no matter how tough it's going, there's always someone suffering a little bit more than you. And what
Yeah,
I try
yeah.
to do every day is give someone a damn good listening to. Just find someone in the teams, a neighbour, someone, and just give them a listening to. And today we're blessed that it can be a phone call. Somebody I haven't spoken to ages. I had this great story the other day. Our post is getting later and later and later. And one of my neighbours, who is the queen of complaining, decided to collar the postman and really give him a bit of her mind. And he just said to us so simply, he said, one of the guys across the road is 88 years old. His eyesight's failing. So what the postman does is take the post. When he comes in with the post, he opens the door, he goes in, sits down, he reads all of his post to him. That's why he's late. What a wonderful act of kindness.
Yes, and wonderful calmness to respond to the person who was shouting at them in such a way. But again, a damn good listening, I think, is something we could all take a lesson from. Mark, just bringing you in on that as well. You've certainly spoken very eloquently about that, even speaking to your competitors. And I know a lot, and I've seen it in the questions, have really resonated with them, something they wouldn't naturally think about. So maybe a few thoughts from you on who in this time you look to, listen to, hear from, and maybe elaborate a little bit on that, going what might feel against the grain for many leaders to pick up the phone to some of their rivals in their own industry or competing industries.
Well, I think another thing that's kind of counterintuitive at the moment is looking to social media. And I say that because social media gets a pretty bad rap, and quite rightly so in many cases when you look at some of the dreadful content that is shared by people on there. But actually, if you use your intelligence to decide who you listen to, who you view, who you share information with, I think there's a world of opportunity. Rennie mentioned the importance of listening. We need to listen and read and learn and look to others. And when you're stuck at home and facing all of these conflicted notions and ideas that are going through our heads, look outside. So going on to LinkedIn, seeing what other companies are doing, reading other people's blogs, listening to the experience of other entrepreneurs, again, looking at competitors or suppliers, what are they saying in the social media space? Because as leaders, people are looking to us to give all the answers. We don't have all the answers. The answers are actually, in many cases, already out there in other sectors and other bright people around the globe. I mean, it is the global community trying to figure out solutions to all of this. I've learned a huge amount just from this morning session. I could listen to Lara, talk all day, because when you're at the coalface of building business, supporting businesses, working with businesses, those what might be thought as, small takeaways. You know what? They're not small takeaways. This is the reality of running a business and getting through this crisis and into, what's it Boris Johnson calls it, sunlit uplands or something. That was a Churchillian statement that he decided to borrow. But anyway, out there somewhere, there are sunnier days ahead, business-wise, as well as outside our window today.
Thank you. So, look, two things are left from me. I'm going to ask each of the panelists just to give us a little final sort of 90 seconds thought that they would want some of those leaders who have listened, those 1,300 or more people who've been on this call and asking the questions. But to all of those listeners, if you do have a moment, would you please fill in the evaluation survey? This is a different environment for MLN, for all of us. We want to see how it worked, what didn't. The button is on the side of your screen. So just do click that and fill that in when we finished up here. Please, it'd be greatly helpful to Evan and all the team. But before I give some concluding remarks from my perspective as an economist, Rennie, perhaps you could give us just a little thought to take the listeners away with over the next few days and weeks as they reflect on this Galvanise Summit.
As I said earlier, that every one of us can be a leader. And the bit to start at and the bit that we can all do, it's real, despair is so much easier than hope. It's so much easier to be down. And I just wonder if all of us just had one thought in our mind. If you're bold, you might fail. If you're not bold, you will fail. It's the moment to just be that little bit bold in everything we do. A little bit of positivity. If all you bring to the discussion is hope, you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you. What lovely words. Lara, perhaps you'd like to also give us your little final reflections for the listeners to take away.
Yes, so first of all, whilst always putting people first, you also have to be commercial and prioritise by profit. And profit comes in many forms. Profitability today, I think, in the new currency of business is as much of giving back and saying thank you because of the sensitivity of their times as actually hardcore profit and you may get payback if you can afford to by investing now to build for later. And then the other thing is that given the fact that I am currently also the cleaning lady, do not forget that some of the greatest ideas can come from the strangest of places. And do not forget to ask your customer what it is they want, because they will surprise you.
Very good.
Thank you. Very inspiring words. And last thoughts from you then, Mark, just to wrap us up here in terms of the actual conference formalities. What little message would you like to give to those who have been listening, little thoughts or nuggets that you might have to keep people inspired over the coming weeks?
Well, I'm gonna lead on from what Lara said. You talk to your customers, and of course you talk to the whole ecosystem in affecting your business's suppliers, your employees, and your competitors. But then my real takeaway is use this opportunity to step right back and evaluate your business, your skills, the multitaskers who work for you, your core capabilities. What is it that you currently do, and how can you develop that going forward so that you can actually build resilience into your business? Because there are opportunities emerging out there. And as Lara said earlier, whether you've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you or whether you're actually seeing new opportunities flourishing, the point is evaluate where you can go as a business and make it a simpler task for you to plot the route ahead.
Thank you, Mark. So look, just a few, we're conscious of our time. We're just about wrapping up now. I just wanted to give you a few observations that I would have from listening to all of our inspirational speakers. Firstly, thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in and listening to us, and thank you to all of our speakers. I've certainly learned a lot, and what's interesting to me is what have I been writing down as we've been talking? They're all words. They're all things like, hope, empathy, listen, communicate. They're all things. They're all describing things that I could take away and do. Talking to someone I haven't spoken to before, speak to an old colleague, maybe working in a different firm, to get a different angle from the voices that I often hear. We have, and you can listen to many seminars and talks, and they're out there, and the business organizations doing a terrific job to help you with this, about the very practical business concerns, the things that Lara mentioned about profitability, about looking through your cost lines. But today was about something a little bit different. It was a bit about leadership and family and network, and about thinking of how we could rely on each other, how we could look to find some of those opportunities in different ways. And what I really took away as a kind of feeling from this is those opportunities and ideas might come from somewhere that we don't maybe expect them to come from. A voice we haven't listened to before, a way of engaging with a different supplier in a way that we hadn't thought. And I guess that really wraps up what I started my economic piece with talking about, which was saying we all can play a part in the recovery. The new ideas that you come up with in terms of how you run your business, the way that you reskill or redeploy talent and think about how maybe to use it differently, the new ideas that you embrace and that maybe push your business into a whole new line and successful area, those all will play their part in the recovery. If you decide to go out and buy a coffee again when we're safe to do so, if you go back to a sporting event when it's safe to do so, to a concert, every bit of that decision that you make puts business back into the economy, pays people's wages, generates the taxes that me and other economists spend our time commenting on. So each and every one of our behaviours will play an important role in how we lead not just ourselves, but our economy and our society through that. I want to wrap up with just a few thank yous beyond those who have directly participated. You heard from Kevin at the beginning in MLN, a great friend and inspiration to me, certainly the man who told me that I could at least bumble my way through a comparing event rather than just being an economist. So thank you to him and all the effort that he and his team have put in the background. And special praise for Gordon Cross from Revolution Productions. You may not know him, you may not have seen him, but I know all the panelists have, and he's been the one that's choreographed this and avoided me pressing the wrong button or muting the wrong people at the wrong time. So thank you very much to Gordon. Well, all that's left for me to do now is to thank you all, encourage you please to fill in the evaluation form. And I'm going to leave the final word. We've talked about innovation, we've talked about creativity and thinking differently. We often think of the private sector in doing that, but the public sector plays a role too. Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council continuing to support leadership forums like this, continuing to think about how we can do things differently. Maybe you don't always think public sector when you think of that leadership role. Here's an example of it being played out by one of our councils here in Northern Ireland. So I'm going to hand you over to Alderman Stephen Moutre, who's the chair of their Economic Development and Regeneration Committee, to sign us off. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you find something inspiring as I did. Thank you very much indeed.
Many thanks, Neil. What a fantastic event, and I hope that you folk enjoyed it and will benefit from it as much as I feel I have. It just remains for me to thank a few people at this time. I want to thank Hermes Insurance and Danske Bank for their support of this event and for their support for the business community in these uncertain times in which we live. Thanks to all of our speakers, especially to our host, Professor Neil Gibson, for chairing this virtual meeting. Neil, you excelled. Thank you again for your help. I want also to mention Management and Leadership Network, along with our own Economic Development Department within Council. They have worked hard to pull this together in a very short time. I think we have a worthwhile partnership to build on. Finally, I want to thank you, the businesses and leaders in Northern Ireland. It is you who will drive our economy forward in the days that lie ahead through tough and uncertain times. But today, we thank you for your presence. Stay safe and keep well, folks.